Hey folks, Doug Blake with Body Design University. And in today's video, I'm going to bring you into chapter 11, which is the integrated exercise programming from evidence to practice. And specifically on page 474, 475, the performance training component of the cardiorespiratory phases in the IFT model, right? So base training, fitness training, and then performance training. And it's really in response to a bunch of questions I get from students that get into chapter 11. I think by the time you get to this chapter, most people are just kind of like, oh my God, there's so much to memorize. And I get it. This is actually really important for two reasons. Number one, of course, you're going to get questions on the performance training phase of the IFT model for sure. Now, whether or not you're going to get anything specific to figure 11.5, which is really where a lot of the challenges come in. Can't really tell you how many or if any questions you're going to get from that, but there is sort of this precision level that you have to understand numbers wise. So that's why it's important from that perspective. But I will tell you that there's a more important reason why you do want to know this, because if you yourself, and I know most trainers that I know train at high levels anyway, so they almost train in the performance training if they're in the cardiorespiratory world. And this stuff is really, really helpful. I've used this training in triathlons and other endurance sports many years ago. And we've always used something similar to this when it comes to determining the total volume that we would use in our interval training. Interval training is critical in the performance or at performance levels, at very high levels. To be honest with you, interval training is great even in the fitness training component as well. Everybody should be doing, as a trainer, should be doing some sort of interval training, even if it's just below VT1 intervals into, zone 2 or between VT1, VT2. But at these higher levels, just so you know, interval training is critical for performance maintenance and increased overall physical capacity and output for the athlete. So to the subject at hand, which is figure 11.5.475, and there is an explanation of it in on page 474, which would be the 1, 2, 3, the fourth paragraph down, where it talks about intervals should be programmed to meet the unique aspects of a client's goal event. Let me go ahead and pull up our digital copy, so it's a little bit easier for you to see. And that's what we're talking about here. Quite often, the questions I get is, how the heck are they getting the numbers that they're getting? And how are they determining which of the multipliers do you use? Okay, so before we do that, here's the problem. And this is why it's confusing. It has nothing more to do with than the fact that ACE is doing what we normally do, which is going back and forth from the American systems to the metric systems. That's where a lot of the problem comes in, because you're seeing kilometers, you're seeing, right, meters, and then we're talking about a mile. And then we're talking about a marathon, which is, they don't even tell you. You got to know the distances, and you got to know what your basic or standard times are. So first and foremost, the best thing to do when you're reading something like this is make sure you get all of your standards to either kilometers or American numbers related to miles. Just as a for instance, me personally, I like to just go back to the mile, just as a for instance, and that's what they're using here as a way of explaining this, using a running methodology. So do yourself a big favor to understand this. Go back to the mile, just as a for instance, and remember they're using a marathon. A marathon is 26.2, I think it's 26.2 miles. Okay. Once you can write it down. Once you get in your brain that 400 meters equals this much of a mile, then you can understand that 4,000 meters or 2,500 meters is equal to this much of a mile, right? It's a lot easier to navigate what they're going through here. So I'm going to do that with you. I'm going to do that with you now, and I'm going to just use basic round numbers to make life easy for all of us. So Let's go to page 474. Intervals should be performed, right? Thus, unique aspects of a client's goal. Yes, using running events. So we're going to use running, right? So people run miles, they run marathons, they run 100 meters, they run 200 meters, they run 10Ks. People run 5Ks. You see how we just switched? Miles, kilometers. Well, choose one. That's the point here, is that if you want to calculate the multiplier and do the work here on this particular figure, you got to go one or the other ultimately, and that's what we're kind of dealing with. Thus, a person preparing for a 1 mile, you see, 1.6 kilometer race might do about 2.5 times the racing distance. Now, this is where people get confused and they go 10 times 400 meters. Whoa, wait a minute. Kilometers, meters. Hang on 1 second. Okay, this is where the confusion comes in. But before you do any of that, here's what you have to understand this figure is trying to tell you. The very first thing you must know in order to understand where they're getting their numbers from and where they're doing their volume, right? So 10 400-meter intervals, is the first thing you must know is how long does it take you to do your race? So if you run a mile, you're a competitor that runs a mile. What is your average time for your mile? Is it 6 minutes? Is it 7 minutes? Is it 10 minutes? Is it 5 minutes? Good for you if it's 5 minutes. Get the idea. So you've got to know either the distance, it's 1 mile, but you got to know what your basic time is. What is the standard time that you do these in? And it doesn't matter if it's 6 minutes and 10 seconds or 6 minutes and 5. It doesn't matter. You round it off to 6 minutes. Does that make sense? A marathon runner, what is the average time to run a 26.2 mile marathon? Okay. If you got to know that time, because that's what's going to help you then to decipher basically what your multiplier is. Does that make sense? So first off, you got to know the time. What is your race and what is the time that you do the race in? In the case of a marathoner, let's say you run make it easy, 5-minute miles. Well, you would do 5 times 26, right? 5 minutes is going to be how many seconds? And now you can calculate way over here, and you're at approximately, I don't know, 150, 180, 210 minutes, something like that. You're going to be at about, 2.5 hours, something, whatever that number is. That's what you got to know first. And that's what the x-axis right here is showing you, race duration. If you run a mile, how long does it take you to run a mile? Well, in general, a competitor, let's just say it's anywhere between 5 to 8 minutes, something like that. Okay. What about a 10K race? Now, again, we say 10K, but what is that in miles? See, I would much prefer to look at it in miles. A 10K is about what? 6.2 miles. But let's just say you're running a 10K race, 6.2 miles. And what's the average time it takes a competitor, or how long does it take you to run, right? The race duration. In general, I don't know, it takes me 40 minutes. I don't know, whatever. 45 minutes, something like that. What about I don't know, marathon? See over here what I was talking about with the marathon. Marathon's going to take you what? 150, 180, 210, 210 minutes, something like that. See, if I know that first, now I can adjust. Now I can adjust and find what my multiplier is. And that's all they're telling you here. So a person preparing for a 1 mile race might do, how long does it take to run a mile? 6 minutes, 7 minutes? Well, if that's 30, that's 15, that's 7.5. Let's just say a 7-minute mile. You'll notice that the y-axis already has the numbers on it from 0 to 2.5. This is already here. This is the predicted multiplier. Where do they get this number from? I don't know. It's just represents a consensus of opinion. Go with it. So they've already given you this multiplier. If I'm over here, okay, my multiplier is going to be roughly 2.5, something like that. What does that 2.5 actually mean? Look over here. 2.5 times the racing distance. What is the racing distance? 1 mile. Okay. Well, now, why are they saying perform 10 times 400 meters? See what just happened? We went from, I'm going to run a mile and I'm 2.5 times a mile, but now you're telling me meters. This is where the confusion comes in, and this is where it's really pretty simple. That's why they give you the equivalent of 1 mile is 1.6 kilometers or 1,600 meters. Got to do your conversions. So a one mile is roughly 1,600 meters. That's why in the Olympics, the these races, the mile race is roughly 1,500, right? They do a 1,500 in the Olympics. So we're going to do 1.6 or 1,600 meters. Now, if they had just written that in the copy here, that would make life easy. I'm just trying to help you navigate through this. So 2.5 times, because we said roughly a 7-minute mile, whoop, jump up here, 2.5 times is the multiplier. Multiply the racing distance, which is 1,600 meters. Well, what's 1,600 times 2.5? What is it? 1,600 times 2.5 is about 4,000, right? 4,000 meters. Do it on your calculator. Do I have a calculator? Yeah, 1,600 meters times 2.5 is equal to 4,000. Does that make sense? Okay. See what I did? It's a mile, but ACE wants you to see it as intervals in meters. So I got to convert somehow or another. And that's why they told you a mile is equal to 1.6 kilometers or 1,600 meters. So a mile is equal to 1,600 meters. Your multiplier is 2.5. 2.5 times 1,600 meters is what? 4,000 meters. Does that make sense? Now that's where, so if it's 4,000 meters, you got to get 4,000 meters in. That's going to be the volume is 4,000 meters. Well, they're saying that the way to get 4,000 meters in is by doing 10 400-meter intervals. Does that make sense? See? Now, could you do 20 200-meter intervals? I guess. I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily. Could you do 5 800-meter intervals? Sure, you could. You could. But they're just giving you this. They're giving you this this design, this program design, based on the numbers that we're looking at. I hope that makes sense. I'm just trying to simplify and clarify because they use mile. You got to convert to kilometers. There's your multiplier, 2.5. And now they're back to running 400-meter intervals, and nothing wrong with using meters, like a 400-meter interval, especially on a standard track, right? Because the standard track is going to make it really easy for you to navigate, right, the distance itself. So 10 400-meter intervals, boom, once, then you take a break, whatever your rest interval is going to be. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So now you've got this guy right here. So 2.5 multiplier for a 1 mile race, whereas, and they tell you, let's say somebody's doing a 10K race, 10,000 meter race. Okay, which is, again, I've never run the 10,000, but I know that it's, about 6. I mean, I have run it in competitions, but not under normal circumstances. So 6.2, roughly 6.2, right? A 10K is about a 6.2 miles. So again, do you run a 10K in a certain period of time? You need to know that number. Now, generally, you might be running a 10K, competitive 10Ks. Folks are at the 30, some in 32, 35, 40 minutes, something like that. Well, if you know your time For a standard 10K run, you've run 10Ks, you run them in competition. What did I say you need to know first? You need to know what your predicted duration is, right? So perhaps you run a 40-minute 10K, 6.2 miles. What's that? 40 divided by 6, you're at about what? 7, right? 7-minute miles, something like that. Well, check this out. Look right here. See, this is race duration. On average, I roughly do it in this. And then you go up to here, and what's going to be the multiplier? It's going to be roughly 1, which means, look what they say. Whereas someone preparing for a 10K race might do approximately equal to the race distance, right? Because the multiplier is 1. 10K times 1 is 10K. You get it? But look what they did to you. Same distance, and now they got you doing 6 1-mile intervals. Well, now wait a minute. I thought we were talking about a 10K, and you got miles. You got to convert back. 6.2 miles, right, for a 10K. How many? 6. Does that make sense? So a total of 6 miles. A 10K race is a total of 6.2, just rounded down to 6. So your intervals are going to be the race distance. If your race distance is 6 miles, you're going to do intervals, 6 intervals of, in this case, a mile. Could I do 3 intervals of 2 miles? Yeah, of course. That'll get me to 6. Can I do 12 intervals of half a mile? That'll get me to 6 miles as well. Okay. The point is that why didn't you just say 6.2 mile race? That would have made life a whole lot easier. Point is I'm just trying to clear it up and clarify it for you. Now move on to the marathon runner, right? Someone preparing for a marathon might have a multiplier of approximately 1/4. Okay. 6 1-mile intervals might be appropriate. Where do they get this from? A marathon is approximately 26 miles. So 26 miles multiplied by 0.25, 26. Let me go ahead and bring up our calculator again. You got a 26-mile race times 0.25 is roughly 6.5 miles. We're not going to do 6.5-mile intervals. We're going to do 6-mile intervals. And so with a 0.25, which is a quarter, with a 0.25 multiplier for a 26-mile race, 26-mile race, doesn't have to be perfect. They're saying, well, let's just run 6 miles. That's our total volume, right? And so it could be 6 times 1 mile. It could be 3 times 2 miles. It could be, like I said before, 12 times a half a mile. But ACE is telling you that a 6 times 1 mile interval volume might be appropriate. And so that's all this is saying, is that a multiplier of, you see 0.25 roughly right here on a marathon. How long does it take you to run your marathon? That's all it's saying. Remember, they're giving you three variations here. One is a very short race, which is a mile, medium distance race, which is a 10K or a 6.2 mile, and a marathon, which is approximately 26 miles. So short, mid, and long, longer distance race. And they're just saying that we don't know what the multipliers are exactly. They even tell you there's no research on this that tells you, oh yeah, it's 2.5 or 2.7 or 1.2 or 0.9. There's no research that says that. But what we do know is from decades and decades of training athletes, the professional training community for athletes has gotten to the point where they're pretty good. They got a pretty good idea that, yeah, that's a good distance. And running mile intervals versus half-mile intervals or versus 2-mile intervals probably makes more sense, but every athlete is different. Okay, so quick recap. In order to understand figure 11.5, what do you need to know first? Your predicted time duration. Do you run your mile in 7 minutes or 6 minutes? Do you run your 10K in 30 minutes or 40 minutes? Do you run your marathon in 2 hours or 3 hours or even 4 hours? Which one is it? Once you know that, now you can look at this line right here. You can look at the, the multiplier. You can determine your multiplier, right? And that's what this graph is kind of showing you. Boom, I jump to that one. It tells me what my multiplier is, right? And that multiplier tells me the volume. So if I do an activity for 90 minutes, I'm at roughly 0.6 as my multiplier. That's going to be my interval, total interval volume, right? And that's going to determine my total distances. And now I'm going to break that up into however many intervals I'm going to do. In the case of a miler, that individual is going to do 10 intervals. Get it? But they're going to be 400-meter intervals. Bam, 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 bam. I'm going to sprint it out, really hard for 400 meters. Boom, take a rest and do that 10 times. The 10K athlete is going to run miles. Now, you're not going to sprint a mile. Generally, you don't sprint a mile. You can kick it up a little bit and get some heat on it, right, for that mile. And you're going to get your recovery, and you're going to do that 6 times. I'm just going by what ACE has given you as examples, right? And they even use the term, it's a reasonable program that you can do with somebody. And then, of course, a marathon runner at 26 miles, you're going to use a much smaller multiplier, and you're going to do intervals the same as you would with a 10K athlete, right? So 6 1 mile intervals to satisfy that volume that they have in there. So, now look, here's the deal. I think this stuff is really cool. You can get very exact. You can get real precise with an athlete when it comes to your training protocols. You really can. If this made sense to you, let's just say, for instance, you had gotten to this point and you didn't understand it, or you may have gotten a little bit of the understanding and then you just moved on. But if this video, what I just went over with you today, if this helped you and now you understand it better, just go ahead and type that in the comment section below. Just type in understood. Okay. Of course, if you appreciate it, obviously give it a like, and you can say thanks for the help on that. We always appreciate that. If you're not subscribed, by the way, to the channel, please go ahead and do that and hit the notification bell as well. Remember, every Wednesday night, by the way, every Wednesday night, 7 p.m., 7 to 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. So 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Mountain, 4 p.m. Pacific. I got it right. We do a Quizlet live study. It's a lot of fun, little competition. And you can win $50, by the way, if you win over the course of that 30 minutes. Great way to study. Lots of fun. We all have a really, really good time when we do it. Generally, at the end of it, we do what's known as a breakout room so that folks can get together and figure out how to create study partnerships, which is, again, very, very helpful. Look, I hope that this clarified for you any confusion you might have had on figure 11.5. If you do have more questions, or if you want the most comprehensive, in-depth study resources to pass your ACE exam, then go ahead and click on the link in that little box that has all that wording in there, right? Just go ahead and click on there, and it will take you right to our ACE exam study. As always, it's a pleasure. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Bye.